La 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 la. Hey y'all, I'm Brad and this is Breva Creative. Recently I got a hold of this awesome bow here, and it's so beautiful that I don't want to just stow it away in a case. Look at all the details and the laminations here. It really takes a lot of skill and attention to detail to make something this cool. So today I'm going to make a pair of wall brackets for it so I can display it and give it a place in our home. I'm really inspired by all of the layers on here, so I'm going to come up with something that complements it. I also want to protect it with a soft surface from scratches, so I'm going to get something to complement this little arrow rest here and dig around in the leather scraps drawer that we have and see what I can find. So now that I have a general idea of what I'm looking for, it's time to go to the drawing board. Let's go. Taking inspiration from the bow, I'm going to be gluing some layers together. I'm thinking a couple layers of walnut to match the dark stripe of the bow with an inner layer of thin basswood. Then I'm going to wrap the middle portion with leather, so I'm okay with that middle portion being like a poplar or a pine or whatever I have lying around. So of course I'm going to need some sort of anchor to the wall. I bought these nifty little brackets to inset into the wood and should hold pretty well. I hope you all can understand my chicken scratch. I'm a visual person, so it always helps me to sketch it out before just jumping headfirst into a project. Here I am drawing the walnut and the basswood layers, and the leather is going to sit in that empty space in the middle. Now that I have a better grasp of what I'm looking for, let's dig around the shop for some scraps. Okay, I got my brackets, I got my piece of poplar for the middle portion, I got my walnut pieces that are just the perfect dimension that I need, which is perfect. My piece of balsa wood, I think this is 1/16 of an inch thick. I did some digging and found this leather sample that I'm super happy with. It's exactly what I'm looking for. It's got the hair on it instead of like a traditional leather, and I just happened to have this sample, which is really lucky. It matches the arrow rest absolutely perfectly. I'm going to start with the easiest step here, cutting out the basswood strips. Just a simple X-Acto blade, doesn't really take a lot of brain science. I guess that's kind of what's cool about a project like this. We don't really have a robust shop, at least not as robust as I would like, but it's amazing what you can do with limited supplies and tools. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more creativity to figure out how you're going to make it work. So to fill in this awkward dead time of silence, here's a little info about the bow. It's a traditional recurve bow made by Damon Howitt, I believe from the 70s. I've never really been into hunting, but target practice is really fun, and I can't wait to get out and try this bow for the first time. Okay, it is miter saw time. I'm going to cut these walnut strips down to size. Wear goggles whenever you're operating sharp, spinny, vroom vroom blades. I've known far too many people who thought they knew what they were doing and either they didn't or a freak accident happened and they weren't prepared. So yeah, just be safe. Okay, we got our wood chunks here. How many wood chunks could chuck wood if a chunky woodchuck... moving on from whatever that was, it's time for the glue up. I like to do a dry run just to keep myself organized and to make sure the wood grain is looking good. I'm using an exterior grade wood glue for this because that is all I have. But for interior projects, you can definitely get away with a less heavy duty adhesive. You'll need some clamps as well for any glue up to get those layers to stick together. I like to apply glue to both surfaces to make sure they're adhered properly. And then just rub it around with your fingers to make sure to coat the entire surface, but you don't need so much that it splooges all over the place and makes a mess, gets on your clamps and your cutting board. Nobody likes that guy, so don't be that guy. When doing the clamping, I like to put a little piece of scrap wood in between the clamp and the wood that you're trying to protect, just to keep it safe and without dings. You also want to just put some pressure on the top to keep the layers lined up. It's a pain in the butt to sand if you don't do that. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be for the glue up. We're gonna come back and sand it to heck and cut it down and make it all square and whatnot. In the meantime, while we wait for this to dry, I'm gonna cut this little bracket for it just to make sure the bow doesn't fall off when it's hanging on the wall. It'll just keep it nice and in place and where it needs to be. Since this is such a small piece of wood, I'm not gonna bother with the chop saw, because that would be overkill, so just this little tiny handsaw will do just fine as long as you tighten it up properly, unlike what I did. Now that we've let the glue sit for a little bit, it is time to undo this clampage. It's looking pretty good so far. Needs a little work, but nothing a bandsaw can't handle. Or a sander. Yeah, not too bad. I really need to make a jig for this bandsaw, but that takes effort. So now we get to do it the hard way. This will just keep it nice and square and will help us a lot when it comes to sanding. Time to get dusty. For sanding something this small, I like to strap it down in a vise, but you really don't have to. Take my advice. An orbital sander helps to knock down a lot of what you need to take off, but I like to come in with some 400 grit just to smooth everything out and get it nice and smooth. And always sand with the grain unless you're the kind of person that likes to watch the world burn. I left just a little bit of an inset on this bottom edge so that the leather can sit in and wrap and be flush with the wood around it. I'm finally going to add the little bow brackets to keep the bow from falling off the shelf, and I'm just going to glue those on. Don't really even need to clamp them. I'm going to wrap them in leather anyways, so they're not going to be going anywhere. Well, sometimes I am an idiot and I forget to do things. So right now I just realized that I didn't cut a dado cut in the center poplar piece to receive the angle bracket. So now we're gonna do some improv with a drill press. This isn't an easy process, so I don't recommend it, but I'm just taking a mildly thick drill bit. Any thinner, the drill bit would snap in half and you don't want that. Definitely wear goggles when you're doing this. I'm just making a series of holes and then going to come back later and connect them all with the drill press by moving the wood side to side. And surprisingly, this actually worked out pretty well. Would have worked a lot better with a dado cut. And there we go, we got a pretty nice tight fit in there with that angle bracket. Applying the finish is always my favorite part. You get to see that final product that you have been working so hard to get. I'm just using a simple polyurethane coat. I'm just coating the walnut and the basswood because there's no need to coat the rest because it's going to be covered in leather. always, always, always wear gloves when handling polyurethane. These are just latex gloves. Don't wear latex if you are allergic. Yes, that is a thing. I'm gonna do one coat of poly, let it dry a little bit, one more coat of poly, let that dry a lot, and then come back with a very light sanding. I'm talking like 400 grit up or 0000 steel wool if you have it. I'm pretty happy with this. It's nice and shiny and came out pretty well, so no complaints there. Next, I'm going to use a 2-part epoxy to get the angle bracket to stick in that hole that we so elegantly created with the drill press. When using 2-part epoxy, you have to mix vigorously to get them to adhere properly. And there we go, those brackets are not going anywhere. And we are on the home stretch. All we have left is the leather and then hanging it on the wall. So for the leather, I'm just going to use the X-Acto to cut this thing, just cutting it to length for now, and I'll cut it down to width later. I'm just going to use regular old tacky glue for this. I think it's going to work pretty well. Also, this glue is extra tacky because it's very old. Tacky glue gets very tacky with age, just like my humor. And just like the previous glue up, you don't have to go too heavy on the glue, just enough that it'll stick. You don't want glue ooze all over the place. I'm using just a little scrap block piece of wood to get the corners really tight and get the surface really smooth. Just using your fingers just was not cutting it. Definitely use some sort of flat surface to press down to get that smooth surface. And again, for the clamps, make sure that you have some sort of wood backer to protect the leather from the clamps, especially a leather like this, because if you twisted this clamp on the actual leather, it would just twist the hair fibers all over the place and ruin your day. And for the last step, all we have to do is cut off the rest of the leather, and there we have it. That is a finished bracket. It is ready to be mounted. Finally, we are ready to hang these puppies. Note to self, always charge drill batteries before recording. Screwdrivers are lame. Alright, I'm pretty happy with these. Like any project, there's always things that I would change if I had a do-over, but nothing important. The bow hangs on the wall nicely and is pretty secure as well. Also, it goes perfectly with our Masonic sword. Don't ask.